find this part interesting because I think that there are levels of subordination. I think that all the grammar structures, all the subordinate structures are not equal. And I base that on the form of the grammar. If you look at subordinate clauses or the relative pronoun structure, it would be hard to get back to those first couple ones, but do you remember it was filled, that grammar structure has a noun, it has a verb, and they're functioning like subjects and verbs and even objects in main clauses. So although it rained, there's a noun and a verb in there. Which I strongly believe. I strongly believe. That's like a main clause. Even relative pronouns are taking the place of a noun, and then they're followed by a real verb form, not a gerund, not an infinitive, not a participle. Okay? So for me, choosing that subordinate structure gives, it's all subordinate, but it's a high level of subordination. Okay, so we'll look at more example sentences, but I like to think of it that the sentence, my main clause sentence, just wouldn't be the same if that subordinate clause stuff was omitted. It wouldn't have the same impact. The level of understanding wouldn't be the same. Something would be missing. So I like to tell my students, if you put information in that kind of structure, it is essential to the sentence. It's not the main idea, but it's essential. You have to have it. So don't put stuff in there that's not important. And we'll see some examples later on, hopefully, that will make this clear. Okay, and that's what I tried to illustrate here. That they're longer, they're more grammatically like main clauses than phrases or single words. That's where the greatest emphasis is. Always remembering it's not the main clause, it's subordinate. And this is not a difficult concept for students to learn. And it's something that when they're self-editing, they can ask themselves, it's a matter of asking themselves the question, is the information that I put in this relative clause or subordinate clause or relative clause with a pronoun, is it essential to my sentence? And if it's not, I tell them, get it out of there. Okay, so medium level, and this again follows the logic of the form aspect of the grammar having an impact on the meaning. Okay, so phrases, verbal phrases, absolute phrases, appositives, and preposition phrases. And we covered examples. Well, I didn't give you an example yet of an absolute phrase, but and if you follow the logic, verbal phrases and absolute phrases have a verb form in there. They've got a participle form. Okay, so it makes sense in that, from a structure point of view, that they have a little more power. Appositives and preposition phrases, if my students are highly advanced, I will tell them sometimes that I can divide this medium level, and that there would be a difference in terms of meaning and use with putting something in a preposition phrase and putting it in an absolute phrase, for example. So they're within this medium level, I might divide it into two and say verbals and absolute phrases, because they have that verb form in them, have a little more oomph to them than appositives and prepositions which contain only nouns. Okay, so all these are kind of in the middle, less than subordinate clauses, but more than single words. And then follows that the lowest level would be single words such as adjectives and adverbs that are modifying other words, and that they give the least weight to subordinate information. And my students accept this pretty well. They seem to understand it, grasp it, and again, I'm constantly on them to take the time. They have to take the time on their self-editing to ask themselves the questions. And some of them are good and somehow have learned along the way, in a way a native speaker would. We don't teach this to native speakers. Okay? Native speakers pick this up by osmosis, by reading good writing and understanding it. If I told and my husband is a decent writer, he can write, which impressed me when I first met him. One of the criteria, I'm not going to marry you unless you're a good writer. No, I never said that, but when I was dating him and I had an opportunity to read something he wrote, okay, here's how to write. That's points. That's points. Goes up in status. Very good. I didn't expect that. My husband is a retired Army officer, and I had this preconceived notion, Army officers all just tough and not a whole lot up here, but no, not true. He was good. So where was I? Oh yes, saying that I always have to be on my students and get them to do that work, to ask themselves the questions. And some of them are surprised that they do it without thinking. They do it like a native speaker, and 90% of what they write, when I point this out to them, is correct. And then they realize what they're doing, and then it's easier for them to quickly go through. Some students struggle longer than others. Just a matter of getting them to put in the time. I don't think it's hard. Conceptually, I think sometimes getting the form on things like verbal phrases and absolute phrases are a lot harder.